Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the start of the 2023 HBCU and MSI Science Policy College Tour. I am Kimberly Grimes, Membership Associate with NSPN, and I am so excited to be hosting this awesome event where a wealth of knowledge and experience will be shared by science and technology policy professionals over the next 3 days for those new to science policy or for those hoping to expand their understanding and delve deeper. Following each session, we will have a Q&A segment with speakers. Feel free to add your questions to the chat as they come to you during the presentation, or you can send me a private message with your question if you feel more comfortable. In the event we do not get to every question, no worries. If they are in the chat, we can get them answered and provided to you after the tour. There will be breaks between each presentation, approximately 15 minutes, to allow you to get up, stretch your legs, and to also view updates on the screen. There will be information about science policy opportunities. It'll allow you to answer some trivia, and a QR code will be provided on screen if you decide you want to register for an upcoming session. You can scan this code to register and get details about upcoming speakers' presentations. As we get started, if you're comfortable, feel free to type your school, organization, and/or where you are located in the chat. Now for some history. The Historically Black College and University Science Policy College Tour was founded in 2020 by Jasmine George, PhD, and Rachel McKinley, PhD, as a response to the lack of diversity, inclusion, and representation within the science policy field. The tour introduces the field of science and technology policy to students who may not have had exposure and engagement with science policy professionals and science policy careers within the legislative fields, government agencies, and the private sector. The inaugural tour in the spring of 2021 was a 3-week seminar series. Relaunching the tour has been a true honor, and I'm very excited about all of our speakers' presentations. Kicking off the tour today is Dr. Alias Smith. Dr. Smith is a program director in the Office of Emerging Frontiers and Multidisciplinary Activities at the National Science Foundation, NSF, Directorate for Engineering. Dr. Smith manages the operations of the Emerging Frontiers in Research and Innovation program, and he serves as the program manager for the Research Experience and Mentoring program that provides additional support to the EFRI program, Engineering Research Centers, and Industry University Cooperative Research Centers. Dr. Smith primarily followed the PhD path to science policy and will be discussing his education and career journey, which includes completing a postdoc at the University of California, San Diego, and touching on the various decision points that led him to his current position at NSF. Without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will hand it off to Dr. Elias Smith.
Okay, thank you very much. And I am going to share my screen for the slides. Okay. Is that showing properly for you?
It is.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So as Kimberly said, my name is Elias Smith. I'm going to talk with you today about my path to working in science policy. My education and career journey, as was mentioned before, largely mirrors what we will call the sort of traditional PhD path. So throughout this presentation, I'll walk you through my time as an undergraduate and graduate student, how that led me to different professional positions I've held. I'll also spend some time discussing my various roles and responsibilities at NSF, and especially the areas where I've been able to have an impact. So I like to say, so along my education and career journey, I was presented with a lot of opportunities. I was able to learn from failures, and overall, always tried to do my best to focus on moving forward towards a particular goal. So I've always had my dad's voice in my head telling me to always keep on keeping on, always moving forward. So that's kind of a theme throughout my education and professional career. So I earned my bachelor's degree at the University of Missouri, Columbia. So I grew up in Chicago, which means I didn't move far from home to go to Mizzou. I majored in biochemistry when I started Mizzou. So not because I knew anything about biochemistry or what that subject was, but primarily because I put biology and chemistry on my college application. And so the department chair for biochemistry came and found me and said, "You are going to be a biochemistry major." And 17-year-old me did not question too much. So I agreed because I liked biology, I liked chemistry in high school. So let's put them together and become a biochem major. Dr. Zahler was that department chair, and he was the first higher education mentor that I experienced, and where he didn't have a lot of time for me because he was department chair, had a lot of duties. When we did interact, he was a great mentor, made sure that I was aware of opportunities, especially when it came to fulfilling college requirements. So at Mizzou, biochemistry is part of the agricultural college. And you need a certain number of credits to graduate from the agriculture college to graduate. There's a lot of interesting courses that they offer. So turf management, agriculture economics, and an array of other agricultural courses. But there was only one major or minor that allowed you access to the ice cream shop, where they made the tiger stripe ice cream. And so, of course, following my stomach, I chose to minor in food science to enjoy as much ice cream basically as I wanted. When I entered Mizzou, I started with a pre-med mindset. I wanted to be a pediatrician specifically. When I started to learn in my first year of college more about what it meant to be on this pre-med track, when I talked to other pre-med students, to doctors, and learned what the day-to-day, I figured out very quickly that this was not the track that I wanted. And so for the majority of my first year, I was really confused, didn't know what I wanted to do. And then, but with my dad's voice in my head to keep on keeping on, always have a goal, I decided Chicago area has a lot of industry. I will graduate with my biochem degree and I will go into industry in Chicago. So that was my focus. I went through my second year at Mizzou with that goal in mind, didn't seek out research opportunities or anything like that. I pushed all of that out of my head because to me at that time, those opportunities were only for people who wanted to go to medical school or wanted to go get their master's. And so a good friend of mine asked me if I wanted to be her research partner. I was hesitant at first, but at the same time, I was also receiving some information from the McNair Scholars Program. So I decided, let me try to give this research thing a try. And I applied to become a McNair Scholar and was fortunate enough to be selected as a McNair Scholar. So I decided to work with my friend on an anthropology project during my third year at Mizzou. My mentor there was Dr. Lisa Sattenspiel, another great mentor who was very encouraging, very enthusiastic, really sparked a love for research in me. And so I learned a lot from this experience. One of the things I learned was I have a knack for research. I have an interest in computer modeling. I have an interest in health and health research. And so I wanted to focus my research, not in anthropology, but on pathogens. So those bacteria or viruses that affect a host, affect people. So I took a summer research opportunity and joined a biochemistry lab that was studying the bacteria shown here. It's called Desulfovibrio vulgaris. it is a bacteria that can basically eat uranium. It can metabolize uranium. So it has a lot of bioremediation prospects. My project focused on the genomics and the potential pathogenicity of this bacteria. So it's something that you want to wrap your mind around before you encourage the growth of this organism in the environment. This summer research opportunity turned into a year-long opportunity. My mentor, Dr. Judy Wall, was very adamant in encouraging me to pursue a PhD, to go to graduate school. So really echoing all the things that I heard from the McNair Scholars Program. And they convinced me and said, okay, I like research. This is something that I want to do. I think I can grow in this space. So I decided, let's go to graduate school, specifically looking to study host pathogen interactions, because that's the love that was sparked in me by the anthropology project and my summer and year-long project working with Dr. Wall. I applied to graduate schools across the US, focused on faculty that, or universities and faculty that worked on host pathogen interactions. And I was accepted an offer from University of California, Los Angeles. So I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to dissect the molecular interactions that govern host pathogen interactions. And so that's why I really wanted to go to graduate school. But why UCLA? For me, with the exception of 2 California graduate school interviews and 1 conference that I went to in San Francisco, I've never spent any significant time west of Missouri. And so I wanted to go and I had that experience. And also the beach was close by. And so that was I'll be honest, that was a major factor. There was a lot of lessons I learned going through graduate school. So I entered graduate school with a severe case of imposter syndrome. And so when I got to the classes and the seminars, I was ready to have everybody be light years beyond what I was able to do. But what I learned was that these classes and these seminars were really designed to bring everybody up to speed. Since in each cohort, everybody's coming from a wide variety of majors, a wide variety of experiences. And so these classes and seminars were really designed to bring everybody together and bring everybody to the same level. So that was very encouraging for me as a first-year grad student. You also, as a first-year grad student, you do your lab rotation. So depending on the university you go to, I was fortunate enough to be able to do a lab rotation in a lab that studied the sexually transmitted infection Trichomonas vaginalis. And I was thinking to myself, yes, I am in graduate school, achieve that goal. I'm going to join a lab that studies host pathogen interaction, going in the right direction. That didn't happen completely. I ended up studying gene expression. So it's shown here is just this quick schematic of the promoter region of a gene. So this was my focus, looking at DNA motifs, figuring out what proteins bind to the DNA and characterizing these interactions. That was my focus. So nothing to do with host pathogen interaction, but it was an incredible experience because my mentor was a very old school mentor. If you could build it yourself, you built it. There were no kits allowed. If you failed, she gave a little bit of guidance, but you had to figure it out. And so with these failings and having to revise hypotheses, you learn a lot of resilience. And so how to depend on yourself, how to research, what are the right questions to ask. So it was a really good experience, even though I didn't get to do my host pathogen interaction like I wanted to do. And as I said, always have that, my dad's voice in the back of my head to keep on keeping on. Don't stop moving as long as you're learning, as long as you're growing. One of the major things I learned from being at UCLA is that I did not want to be a faculty member, did not want to be a primary investigator. I admired my mentor, she is great, but I realized I did not want to emulate her or the other faculty around me in the surrounding labs, honestly. To me, they were too removed from the bench. They were always writing grants, which is very ironic given my current position as a program officer. I am away from the bench and I am now managing the review of those grants that those faculty members are writing. I did have examples of potential career paths. So I've seen the postdocs in the lab that were working with me. I've seen my colleagues, my peers go to industry, to go to startups, seen some of them go to science policy fellowships, but none of that kind of sat right with me. So I wasn't really ready to make a decision on which way to go. And so what I did was I applied for a postdoc position at the University of California, San Diego. So this is their starship looking library that's kind of iconic on their campus. So why UCSD? Finally, I can study host pathogen interactions. I joined a lab that studied Giardia lamblia. So this is a little parasite that lives out in the environment, infects people who drink contaminated water or eat contaminated food. And this little parasite transforms itself to infect a person and then transforms itself again to live out in the environment free from that person. The other reason I chose to study this guy is because they're very photogenic. So this is a close-up of one of the little parasites, looks like kind of a face with a little crooked smile. I was able to use a lot of my skills from graduate school to transfer over to working in postdoc, but I was able to learn a lot of things like cell biology, as well as a lot of imaging techniques. And so it's just widening that repertoire. I won't go into the data here, just wanted to show you some fluorescent images because to me, they always look pretty. I love this research. I love the science, love the people I worked with, but there was one thing that was missing that I had in graduate school, which was being a mentor and teaching undergraduate researchers in the lab. So I wanted to find a way to continue that and explore growing in that space. And with that in mind, I began moonlighting as an adjunct professor at National University. So I taught night classes at National University and discovered that I really love teaching and that this is the direction that I want to go in. So at the completion of my postdoc, my family and I moved to the DC area, and I joined the faculty at Northern Virginia Community College. So at NOVA, I was able to have a small research group. So I was able to continue on working on my postdoc projects a little bit, but my primary focus was teaching, mentoring, and advising. So I taught primarily general biology courses and biotechnology courses. In my second year at the college, I was tapped to serve as the program head for the biotech program. So this is my first taste of admin work or programmatic work. So a lot of my duties as program head were to develop recruitment strategies aimed at increasing the size and the diversity of our incoming cohorts. I worked a lot with our industry partners for potential internships and career opportunities, and just in general guided the curriculum development to keep pace with science as it evolved. And so I love the teaching, the mentoring, the advising, and over the 6 years that I worked at NOVA, the program level work became very important to me. I began to see that I really have something to offer, something to contribute to the different aspects of higher education. So I started considering, what can I do besides teaching? So I looked at the administration route. So I applied for associate dean positions. I applied several times, ultimately was not selected, which was kind of a downer at the time. But while I was then forced to think about next steps, if this is not going to be a path open to me right now, what can I do differently? So I took feedback from selection committees and started to build myself into a person that could be competitive for associate dean or dean position. But while doing that, I was also fortunate to have several friends who were current or former science policy fellows. And so talking with them, talking with their networks, I learned that I can bring my science knowledge, my lived experiences, my perspectives as a community college professor to the national stage and start to try to interact, impact national policy and national practices. So I applied to become a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. I was accepted to be a AAAS Fellow. It was hosted by the National Science Foundation. And as was said in my introduction, and you can see by the map, I went to NSF and I basically have not gone back. So I initially took a leave of absence from the college, but and after my first year as a fellow, resigned from the college and remained at NSF. So there will be other presentations that you'll be able to hear that will describe fellowship opportunities, including this one, including the AAAS fellowship program. So I won't go into too much detail, but in short, the program looks to attract PhD level scientists and engineers to serve in the executive branch agencies. So for example, the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, USDA, State Department. Fellows have the opportunity to really learn about science policy, make a career transition or pivot like I did, or it can be their next career step. But overall, you're looking to contribute to addressing societal needs. So at NSF, the mission is shown here. This is a mission that is pulled directly from the National Science Foundation Act of 1950. We look to promote the progress of science, advance national health and prosperity and welfare, and secure the national defense. And there's other purposes that Congress can add on. The NSF vision, however, is more nimble. It evolves depending on the priorities of the administration, of current NSF director. So the current NSF vision reads a nation, or a snippet from it reads, a nation that leads the world in science and engineering, research and innovation to the benefit of all without barriers to participation. And it's really that last part of the mission that is really important to me, is the without barriers to participation. Excuse me. And so when I joined NSF as a fellow, I joined the Biological Sciences Directorate, specifically in the Division of Molecular and Cellular Biosciences. And drilling down further, I was part of the Systems and Synthetic Biology cluster. So initially as a fellow, I was able to use my science background directly as I supported this cluster with portfolio analyses, merit review grant proposals. I helped them review. Also aided in the strategic thinking around our cluster's research priorities. Outside of that specific cluster responsibilities, I was able to play integral roles in interagency synthetic biology visioning activities and other road mapping activities. So these are documents or meetings and guidelines that will help direct the priorities nationwide as well as agency-wide, specific to the different agencies. I was also able to contribute to communication efforts of the overall division. But the most impactful project that I had as a fellow was I developed an outreach program to HBCU faculty, where faculty participate in a mock panel review, allowing a clearer view into the merit review process, so it's less of a black box. The program also included grantsmanship workshops. So the overall goal of this HBCU outreach project is to increase the number of competitive submissions from HBCU faculty. So I started this outreach program in 2018 with just our one division, MCB. The next year, I was able to grow this to include all 4 divisions within the Biological Sciences Directorate. And it continues on. So it's going 5 years strong, this outreach project annually. So it's one of, I guess one of my most proud moments of being part of NSF was being able to start this lasting outreach opportunity. So I learned a lot during my time as a fellow. As I said, I decided to leave the community college and make a solid and concerted pivot to science policy and remain at NSF. So I was converted from a fellow to associate program director, and I remained with bio for a year before I successfully competed for a position in the engineering directorate where I am currently. So I joined the Emerging Frontiers and Multidisciplinary Activities Office. We also just call it EFMA. As an EFMA program director, I have 2 main programs that I manage. The first is called the Emerging Frontiers in Research and Innovation. And so this is a program that supports cutting-edge engineering-led projects. And the topics of the projects change roughly every 2 years. And they are always focused on national needs or national grand challenges. So currently, one of the topics centers around brain-inspired hardware and software. Some past topics include distributed chemical manufacturing, so breaking down huge chemical plants into smaller, manageable chemical processing plants that can be situated regionally. We also had a project that was centered around the elimination of end-of-life plastics. So all of these topics have a national need or a grand challenge. One of the things that I really like about the EFRI program, the Emerging Frontiers program, is that every award has to have a robust broadening participation plan. And this plan needs to detail how the particular research team will actively work to increase the diversity in science and engineering. Excuse me. Earlier, I described how mentorship has played a key role in shaping me during my education and professional career. And it's important, everybody can agree that it's important. And so recently we required all EFRI proposals, all awards, to have a student mentoring plan. So every project needs to be very aware of how they are going to mentor their undergraduates and their graduate students and lay out very clear activities and plans. And so putting mentorship up front on almost equal footing with the science that is being proposed. And so just to be clear with that, it's like basically no projects are able to be funded from this program unless they have a solid broadening participation plan and a student mentoring plan. The second program that I manage is called the Research and Mentoring Program, or REM. So this program provides funds to teams that will support cohorts of historically underrepresented research participants. So these can be women in engineering, individuals with intellectual disabilities, veterans. So we leave it wide open, but historically underrepresented research participants are supported by this program. So typically we support about 130 research participants across about 20 sites nationwide. And this fits into the broadening participation priority of National Science Foundation. So this program is really just a small part, a small discrete effort to address equity and inclusion and mentoring as important aspects of NSF and what NSF supports. But I'd like to tell you one more thing that I'm involved in. So about 6 months ago, I was asked to co-lead the implementation team for an agency-wide initiative. And so this initiative is called the Eddie Bernice Johnson Includes Initiative. And this is a very busy slide here. I'm going to attempt just to give you the highlights of it. Overall, the Includes Initiative works to collaboratively impact systemic change to broaden participation in STEM. Starting at the bottom left here with NSF, so where we are, NSF solicits proposals, reviews them, selects awards, and then convenes the stakeholders to do the work and also evaluates the progress along the way. So the different funded projects fall into different categories. So launch pilots or consortia or alliances, which are large groups of institutions. And these funded projects work to change systems, not just impact locally, but to impact nationally. And we have a coordination hub that is integral to coordinating all of the different projects, as well as bringing in our outside funders and federal partners. So each project builds a collaborative infrastructure. So that's his first big arrow here. And we're looking for systemic change. So that's always the guiding theme, the guiding principle. And then as the different projects are working to figure this out, building knowledge, building practices, we bring them together to foster more connectivity, more network formation, engagement, and to keep scaling, to keep growing. And the idea is that we will be able to bring together everybody's efforts to ultimately impact our goal, reach our goal, which is to increase diversity and inclusion in STEM at a national scale. And so I'm very proud to be able to work on this type of project this type of project that is focused on a national impact with systemic change. So my education path has taken me from an undergraduate major at Mizzou to a PhD and at UCLA, earning further training at UCSD. Along the way, I've discovered pieces of what I wanted to do when I grow up. And I figured out things that I definitely wanted to avoid in my long-term career. So for example, I loved teaching, mentoring, and programmatic work while I was a faculty member at Northern Virginia Community College. That allowed me the growth and the experiences that I really needed to be a successful program director at NSF. Just want you to keep in mind as I walked quickly through my story that my path is only one example of how you can develop a career in science policy. By no means is the only path. And I know in other sessions, you'll be able to gain insights to many other opportunities and potential ways to become involved in science policy as a career. So with that, I would just like to stop there and open up the floor to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, Elias. I know I have questions, so I'll kick it off and then open the chat, and or if people want to come off mute, or the raise hand feature is also there. You mentioned the transition to the West Coast, California. Could you talk a little bit about like that, I guess maybe culture shock, while also, you know, your journey of education?
Definitely. So the culture shock of going over to the West Coast, especially from Chicago area and central Missouri, is the first thing that hits you is the cost of living. Los Angeles is a lot more expensive than Columbia, Missouri. And so that was an adjustment there. I actually enjoy and fit very well into the West Coast mentality and the pace of the work and the balance of life that is there. And so that was something that I was not necessarily looking for or aware of. I kind of look back in hindsight as 2020 to say that that really did fit me well. I forget the other part of your question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it was that just since it was simultaneous with your education journey, I was just kind of wondering how that all kind of hit you.
Yeah, and it's when I said I applied to many institutions across the nation, they were really across. So there was University of Minnesota, there was University of Chicago, of course, because that was back home. There was another institution in California and a couple on the East Coast. And so I was looking widely, and my focus was I want to, go into host pathogen interaction. That was my focus. I wasn't necessarily thinking geographically. Since then, since I've had mentees, I have advised them to kind of factor that in at least a little bit when they're choosing where to go next in their journey, is to look at that culture and how that would affect you, because you will need to live there for several years.
So we have a couple questions in the chat. I'm gonna go in order. How important was mentorship in your journey? How do you find a good mentor outside of your PI?
Good question. Mentorship was incredibly important in my journey. Without mentorship, without the mentors that I had, I do not think that I would have gone into research. It was not something that was on my radar. Not because I didn't think I can do it, it's just because I didn't see myself there. Like my path, I was thinking, okay, get my bachelor's, I go into industry, done. That was really my thinking. But to have mentors to kind of open my eyes and point me in directions that I didn't think that were for me. And so, and just, to encourage me to try out the different opportunities to learn firsthand what was for me and what was not for me. So like I said, I did the anthropology project and learned that anthropology was not for me, but the research part, like I love that. Having a question, diving into data, just all of that was great. I wanted to keep doing that. As far as finding a good mentor outside of your PI, the best mentors, the best way that I have done that was actually through my peers. And so when I was in graduate school, I would talk a lot to my fellow graduate students and just ask them, like, hey, how's your boss? What do they say? Are they encouraging? Do they have good advice? And things like that. And then if you got something positive, I would just, go over there, knock on the door and say, hey, I'm Elias. I know so-and-so in your lab. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Can I have some of your time? And it was the same thing at NSF when I was a fellow. I would ask my fellow fellows, hey, how's your mentor? Do they have time? Are they encouraging and things like that? And so that's my sort of tried and true method of finding my more informal mentors.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Jasmine. Our next question is from Dan, who starts with great presentation. Could you describe your views on the role of civic engagement in the context of the broader policy engagement role you have experience in doing?
So the civic engagement, can you sorry, I don't know if Dan wants to come up. Can you define a little bit more of what you're being in the civic engagement?
Sure, yeah, that means going on camera, even though I'm having a bad hair day, but thank you. Yeah, it's so I'm setting up a program that had previously featured policy engagement as a means of getting our grassroots scientists involved in bringing science into decision-making processes. But during our pilot phase over the last few years of the local science engagement network, we ran into the uncomfortable reality that the science community doesn't very often set the policy agenda. And so we're pivoting back to civic engagement, which is, just basically public engagement, but with, business and institutional, civic, and community leaders as a way of elevating the discourse with the long-term goal of reasserting the role of science in a way that we hope circles back to policymakers. So it's kind of an end run rather than putting our members in direct engagement positions initially with policymakers. We want essentially to just build the appetite for science and making these important decisions. And I'm just curious if in any of the work you did, you found that having civic and community partners who were also using science as a tool for decision making helped the policy engagement work that you and your colleagues might have done.
I understand. Thank you. So my only direct engagement with that will be how we select our topics for our FRE program. And so that topic selection process starts with an open call to the community. So basically anybody in the nation can submit ideas. These ideas get viewed by, we have a large working group, and we actually invite them into the agency. The ones that kind of bubble up to the top, the exciting ones, the ones that are, for us, we're looking for high risk, high reward. So the things that are kind of out of the box. And we bring them all into NSF and we have that conversation, that discourse. And then NSF, then we do still stand as that intimate or middle person basically to grab those ideas and develop them. And then we put out our funding opportunities based on that information. As far as how that will then circle around, I would say the reality of it is then that the research institutions are then applying to those funding opportunities, but the public had a hand in guiding what the priority will be, like what investment we will make, what area we will invest in. That's the only kind of the closest that I've come to that type of engagement.
Thank you. And thanks for that question, Dan. Another question from Millicent in the chat. My question is about transitions as well. Was there anything else you found especially difficult or easy while making these transitions? For example, did organizations you apply to welcome your experience of transitions or question it?
So very good question. And I would say I've experienced a mixed bag, even within agencies. And so I'll leave agencies' names out of my application process and what was accepted and not accepted. I would say that becoming a program director, I did not necessarily follow the traditional route. A program director at NSF typically has been a faculty member for, especially a permanent program director, has been a faculty member for 10, 15, 20 years, and then competes for a position at NSF. I was a faculty member at a community college, did small amounts of research, still stayed current with everything. And so when I was looking at the end of my fellowship, looking to apply to several institutions, several agencies for that programmatic role, like somewhere at the level of program director, some agencies looked at my experience and were like, great, you're going to bring a lot to this position. Other agencies looked at my CV and my experiences and said, well, whereas we think you can do this programmatically, we do not think that you have the connections, the experience, the experience as a PI running a lab that we want you to have. And so that my path wasn't well accepted in some areas. And so what I've done was actually to find within NSF, so for example, it was kind of the right place, right time, where 2 program directors rotated out, and that office lost expertise that it needed that I could fill. And so I was able to step into that position and show that I can do the programmatic work, I can interact with the community, I can, all of the things that are required of a program director, I can do. And then I was able to learn from that experience and then step up to compete for the position that I have now. And so sometimes I found that you have to really find other ways to show that, yes, I am capable. Yes, you are capable. And then you kind of get there. So it's kind of ego bruising when you get that no and you learn why you're being told no and you don't agree with that. But that's where you just have to take a step back, take the ego out of it and say, what's my next step? How do I move forward? How do I represent myself to whoever I'm going to apply to next? And so it's the hard part was the ego bruising. The easy part is once you do find a place that will accept you for what you can bring to a position, I found that that type of culture really will let you fly. They will let you come with ideas. They will give you the space, the latitude to grow those ideas. And so that's kind of in the back of my head. If I were ever to apply for another position ever again, that's the culture that will be on the forefront that I'm looking for, is where will they let me grow? Will they let me let me explore? Will they let me put my ideas forward?
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for all that. And kind of on the note of ego bruising, you had mentioned when you got to grad school, this feeling of imposter syndrome. I know that's something that a lot of people in education and early professionals deal with. So could you maybe talk a little bit about that and also kind of how you got out of it?
Yeah, so my cohort at UCLA, there was about 60 of us. And I'm not going to recall the exact numbers, but probably out of that 60, there were only about 7 or 8 of us that were not from one of the more prestigious institutions. And so the group of us had to sort of like, well, how do we get in? Type of attitude. The thing that broke us out of it was when we had to do group work on different projects and some of the classes, some of the seminars, and you realize that some of the classes that you've taken that somebody else hasn't taken, you can come in as like, oh, I'm familiar with this, and you could show your strength that way. And that was uplifting. And so I found that, so for example, I was a biochemistry major, and I went into a more biology focused graduate program. And so a lot of my cohort didn't have the biochemistry training as deeply as I did. And so when we came to biochemistry sections, I was able to kind of step up and be a stronger contributing person in our working group. And so that lifted my spirits a lot, just kind of to see that. And then to have the instructors really hammer home continuously over the terms that they're not trying to weed anybody out. They're not trying to figure out, necessarily who's the strongest, who's the weakest. They're trying to bring everybody up and to recognize that everybody's coming from a different place. Everybody has different experiences, but everybody is able. And so they did a really good job. And I can only speak for the UCLA program that I went to, but they did a really good job at lifting up everybody. And I can just really count myself as fortunate for, again, finding that type of environment.
Thank you for that. That was awesome. Okay, so I don't see any more questions in the chat right now, but I have another one. You mentioned when you were teaching at National University and you were part of some recruitment strategies. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about some of the difficulties you encountered with that, and then also maybe some of the tactics you used to overcome some of those obstacles.
Yes, definitely. So this is when I was at the community college as the program head for the biotech program. So I inherited the program. It was fairly small number of students that came in and was not a very diverse cohort, and looking past over the years back, historically was not a very diverse cohort. And so I made that one of my goals that was fully supported by my advisory board they were never going to tell me don't grow enrollment, but to focus on diversifying enrollment. And my strategies included just going across all of the campuses. So Nova has 6 campuses. And so I would visit the campuses and hold workshops. I would hold meet and greets. I would go to different classes, whichever classes the faculty member would give me time. And I would just talk to and promote the biotechnology program and how the different opportunities that you had to transfer to, we had a transfer agreement to Virginia Tech or to George Washington, for example, and to see people's eyes light up to say, hey, so there's a path for me to go to Tech. There's a path for me to go to GW. This is great. And so sort of opening their eyes to the different paths that way. We also had a program on the campus that brought in about 300 high school students that were planning to come to Nova. And so I would always hold a workshop there and put forward, and kind of strategically in my presentation, put forward Black and brown scientists and researchers, and they would be featured. Just the idea is see yourself in this space. You need to be able to see yourself. The difficulty is we're small staffed. There's me and I had one other primary faculty member. And so there's only 2 of us. And so that was a difficulty in trying to grow everything when there's 2 of us and we have full teaching loads, we have full committee assignments, we have like everything that comes into being a faculty member. But then we take this task on ourselves to try to grow enrollment and diversify enrollment. So we were actually very successful in our first 2 years of concerted effort. We doubled enrollment, and our statistics for women enrolled went to 55% that first year. I forget what it was the second year. And we were, I'm sorry, I can't remember the percentage, but our percentage of underrepresented students were significantly increased as well. And so we were meeting our goals. I'm curious now, I should go back and look at the stats to see how they're doing now since I've left there and after setting up some practices. But yeah, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of ongoing effort, because if you stop for even 1 semester or 1 year, you've lost that potential group of students. You've lost their eyes, so they won't see you. They've already moved to something else. And so it's ongoing is the lesson learned from there, is that you just can't stop.
Thank you for that. That's very insightful. And you made a quote of see yourself, people need to see themselves in this space. And I know, I can probably speak for Jasmine and Rachel, who founded this tour, of the sentiment of creating the HBCU and MSI college tour set, so that those in communities that often aren't, being engaged with science policy and science and technology policy can see themselves in this space and know that they can, integrate themselves and make a difference and get that education. So it's definitely a wonderful opportunity to hear you talking about it and to tell us more about like your full and rich journey and where you are now. That's really exciting to hear. So thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat. Yeah, so I just want to thank you, Dr. Smith, for taking the time today to tell us about your career and educational journey in science policy. I know I learned a lot, and just being able to walk away with just seeing it from someone's perspective, that you don't necessarily have to go, I guess, maybe the path that someone else talks about or that you maybe readily see. And that's really exciting to know there's different avenues and trajectory there. So if no one else has any questions, I will go ahead and wrap up this first session. And since we are wrapping up a little bit early, I do want to let everyone know that this link or this Zoom room will be open. And if you want to step back in around 1:50, just to get settled, about 2 o'clock is when I will introduce our next speaker, who will be Dr. Deborah D. Stein. So definitely come back later. And again, Dr. Elias Smith, thank you for your time and all of this wonderful information. We really appreciate you taking the time to come today.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.